Christians love to talk about sin. When is somebody else's? We see it on the news, we call it out on social media, we shake our heads when we see people making bad choices. But what about the sins we ignore? The ones we justify, the ones we excuse, or the ones we don't even recognize as a problem? You see, all throughout the Bible, we're told to examine our hearts. Not just our neighbors, not just our friends or cultures, but our own hearts. And that means we need to be honest about the things that are going on in our lives that we've let slide. In this video, it's not about pointing fingers at the world or your neighbor. It's about holding up a mirror and examining your own life. Are there sins in your life that you've ignored, justified, or dismissed because everybody does it? You see, Jesus doesn't just call out the obvious sins. He challenges us with the hidden ones as well. The ones people overlook, the ones that are quietly taking a hold of our hearts. And so today in this video, we're going to dive into 7 sins that Christians often ignore. And the purpose of this video isn't to judge or shame you, but to call us to wake up, because we can't fix what we won't face. So let's take a look at this list. First up, we have gluttony, the sin that we often celebrate. Gluttony is one of the most accepted sins in the church today. We call out all kinds of moral failings, but when it comes to an overindulgence in food, in drink, and excess, we often glorify it. Church events are often centered around eating, and overeating is often joked about. But the Bible is clear. Self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. Now, let me be clear here. Enjoying food isn't a sin. Occasionally eating too much is not a sin. In fact, the Bible encourages feasting in the right context. But when food, drink, or indulgence starts to control us, it can become an idol. And gluttony isn't just about eating too much. It's about excess in anything. And our culture teaches us that more is better. But Jesus calls us to discipline, moderation, and self-control. And we need to ask ourselves, is food ruling my life, or is God? And next on this list, we have fear and anxiety. It's a sin that we often justify. And now, again, I need to be really clear here. Mental illness is not a sin. If you struggle with anxiety or depression due to medical reasons, this is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the fear and anxiety we choose to hold on to. Our obsession over money, over politics, over health, or over the future. Is it rooted in a lack of trust in God? Because Jesus directly told us not to worry. Yet we often let fear dominate our thoughts and our decisions. And we live in a world that thrives on fear. The fear of the future, the fear of failure, the fear of loss. But here's the truth. If Jesus actually conquered death, what do we actually have to be afraid of? You see, worry, it doesn't fix our problems. What it does is it steals our joy. Fear doesn't give us control. It drains our faith. And so instead of living in constant anxiety, we should be casting our cares on God. Because at the end of the day, He's the one in control, not us. Third on this list is the sin of idolatry. It's a sin that hides in plain sight. And when we hear the word idolatry, we tend to think of golden statues. But let's be real. Idols are around today. They just look different. The idol might be that screen that you hold in your hand for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. It might be your social media accounts, your career, your reputation, your money. Idolatry is anything that takes God's place as the most important thing in your life. And here's the test. What's the first thing you think about in the morning? What's the last thing you think about at night? Because whatever that is, it might be your idol. And the problem with idols is that they promise happiness, but they always leave us empty. We think if I just get that promotion, if I just get that house, if I just get that body, if I just get him or her, then I'll be fulfilled. But they never truly satisfy. And Jesus warned against this. He said, no one can serve 2 masters. So what's competing for God's place in your life? It's time to let go of those idols that don't last and pursue the one who does. Fourth on our list is consumerism. It's the sin that we often excuse. We live in one of the wealthiest countries in history, yet most of us are buried in debt and discontent. Why? Because we're constantly told we need more. More stuff, more status, more luxury. And Jesus told this parable in Matthew 25, and he told it about stewardship. That God has entrusted us with resources, with time, with money, and opportunities. And he expects us to use those things wisely. But instead, what we often do is we use it all on ourselves. And when we use it up, we take on debt to take on even more stuff for ourselves. And again, let me be clear here. Money's not a sin. But letting money and possessions run your life is. And if we're consumed with what we own instead of what we give, we've lost sight of what truly matters. You see, consumerism teaches us to chase the temporary, where Jesus is calling us to invest in the eternal. So instead of asking, what else can I get? Maybe we should be asking, what else can I give? And next up on this list is a touchy one, and that's nationalism. And this is when patriotism becomes an idol. And don't misunderstand me. Loving your country is not wrong. But when loyalty to a nation or a political ideology outweighs our allegiance to God, it becomes idolatry. And too many Christians are more concerned about the direction of their country than the direction of their own faith. And if we get more emotional about politics than we do about the lost, we might have our priorities out of order. You see, the truth is, God's kingdom doesn't fit neatly into any political party or any government. Jesus was not a Republican. He was not a Democrat. His mission was bigger than any earthly system. And so ask yourself, where's your real allegiance? Because if your hope is in politics, it's going to fail you. If you trust in a nation, it will let you down. But if your faith is in God's eternal kingdom, you will never be shaken. Number 6 on our list is the sin of idleness. It's the sin of doing nothing. You see, some sins aren't about what we do. They're about what we fail to do. And idleness isn't just about being lazy. It's about passivity. It's knowing what's right, but staying silent. It's about watching people fall into sin and saying nothing. It's seeing a need and walking away. In Genesis, when Eve was tempted, where was Adam? He was standing there. He was doing nothing. And today, many of us, we do the same. We're passive in our families, we're passive in our communities, and we're passive in our churches. We see the struggles, we see the needs, but we don't step in. And James 4:17 says, if anyone knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin. And Jesus doesn't call us to be spectators. He called us to step up, to protect, to lead, to love, and to fight for what is right. So sitting on the sidelines isn't an option. It's time to get in the game. And last up on this list is the sin of comfort. And it's the lie that keeps us stuck. One of the biggest lies that we believe is that life is all about our personal comfort. But listen, it's not. Jesus never promised you an easy life. In fact, he said to take up your cross to follow him. But too many of us live as if Jesus is calling us to live a safe and easy, a predictable life. But look at his life. He didn't choose comfort. He chose sacrifice. He stepped into hard places. He gave up everything for us. And now he's calling us to do the same. And listen, comfort in and of itself is not a sin. It's not a sin to be comfortable. But when it keeps us from stepping into faith, when it keeps us from serving others, from obeying God, it becomes one. Because following Jesus is eventually going to lead all of us to uncomfortable places. That's where real growth happens. And the question we need to wrestle with is, are we willing to step out? So here's the challenge for you. Here's a challenge in all of this. Which one of these sins do you struggle with? Be honest. It's easy to nod along. And it's easy to think about how other people in our lives need to hear this, but that's not the point of this video. The point here is self-examination. The sins that we ignore, they don't go away. What they do is they dig deeper into our hearts until they shape our character, our decisions, and ultimately our relationship with God. Hidden things don't go away, they fester. But the good news is, God's grace is bigger than your blind spots. And when we bring our sins into the light, He doesn't shame us. He forgives us. He restores us, and He transforms us. But that can only happen when we're willing to admit where we've fallen short. So let's start a real conversation. Which one of these hits home for you? Drop a comment down below because I'd love to hear what God is doing in your life. And if this challenged you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, subscribe, and share this video so that others can benefit as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.